always on vacation cause we get high, get high, get high. Put your
There you
hands
go.
in the sky.
Does it have a thing where it doesn't lean, like go back?
Oh yeah, it should. It should push in. There's a second
Oh.
one. There it is.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Don't fall backwards through the
Yeah,
through our brick wall there, huh? Yeah. Don't break the illusion. That's actually called breaking the fourth wall.
Okay.
Are you familiar with film and TV stuff, man? Are you
Not too much. No.
No. That was my background originally, and then I got into obviously the cannabis industry by force since I went out there to make movies, and I ended up growing and working with the dispensaries, and then I worked. Then once I worked in the industry there, and about from 2007 to about 2012, trying to make it in the movie industry at the same time. And then I came out here to Arizona and helped open up Herbal Risings and Herbal Wellness Center, which turned into our Herbal Risings Cannabis College, which helped staff all those other dispensaries. That's where we met in like 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, and I first experience I had like in filmmaking was back in 2011 probably when I first moved down to Phoenix, and that was sort of a movie. It was called Chronic Future. And it was centered around Al Sobel's kind of 2811 Club experience when they got
Chronic Future, though.
Chronic Future.
I like that title.
Chronic Future: A Cure for Cancer.
Oh, okay.
So that was
so it's not like the cyborgs are turned into bongs.
No, no. It was
That's where my mind went.
A documentary,
Okay,
but it was like filmed as a documentary, but it was sort of like. They had cameras in my office for like a week and shit, and then I'd be sitting around maybe talking to Al Sobel, and all of a sudden he'd come in and say, "Can you guys have that same conversation you just had?" So that's when I learned that it's not
real.
Really,
yeah, it's a little scripted. Well, this is live. This is real, and we are broadcasting with Tom Dean. So we are actually live on our page Toking today. So welcome.
Well, all right, great
Tom Dean.
Great to
welcome
be
everybody.
Here.
Woo! I need a little cheer button. I have every button but a cheer button.
Yeah.
I can drop a bomb on you and everything else, but I can't cheer.
Well,
I need that next. We need a little.
Yeah, jazz hands.
Yeah, for the deaf people watching, for the deaf people tuning into the podcast.
Right.
We get applause.
Or the Democratic Socialists, don't forget. They love to do that too.
Oh yeah. Is that what it is? They don't make noise?
They're not allowed to clap at their conferences. Yeah.
Knocking over my stuff here.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you about vaping.
I'm good.
You don't partake.
I don't during the day.
I didn't mean to do that on air.
I'm one of those that I'm not cannabis and concentration don't really go hand in hand with me. So some people it does. I know.
Well, I mean, that's the good thing about a podcast is there's no focus anyways, so we can just light it up in here. No, that's Toking today isn't really about smoking. It's really about getting the subjects and find out what really is hindering Arizona and of course the nation as far as cannabis, and we're also focusing on all sorts of things from entertainment. We have comedians coming in here, but they all kind of relate back to that cannabis. As you know, cannabis is involved in all aspects of everyday life and businesses and careers. And we're kind of talking about that off air. Is what is a cannabis attorney? And you're saying they're coming from all different life, all different aspects of the industry.
Practice, nowadays, yeah.
And so because cannabis is involving all aspects, huh?
Right. Yeah.
So when did you actually start your legal career?
Well, it was I'm from Ohio originally,
okay.
And so I went to Cleveland, a school called Cleveland Marshall College of Law after college for law school, and I practiced for a couple years actually in Ohio. Became licensed there in 1993.
Okay.
And I moved out to Arizona to Flagstaff.
Just getting away from the weather, or Flagstaff isn't much different.
But it's sunshine.
Yeah.
So people back east. Some of them have to stare at those ultraviolet lights.
Oh yeah, because the SAD, huh?
Seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah.
So I love the sunshine, and I realized when I did move out to Flagstaff that it really wasn't the cold that bothered me so much as it was just the lack of sunshine. For half the year.
So the cold's okay, but it's that missing the sun. It's just overcast all the time over there, huh?
Right. Perma. I grew up on Lake Erie, so it's that lake effect, and it's just like a permanent ceiling.
Oh wow.
For 4 months without any sunshine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving to Arizona definitely perked up.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I moved out to Flagstaff. I didn't have a job or anything like that.
Okay.
I knew I had some friends who had a practice down here in Phoenix that I'd gone to law school with, and they asked me to come out. So I came out, took the bar, passed it, started working with them, but then realized, what I'd been to Arizona, but what I really had fallen in love with was Flagstaff. And I decided after a couple months down here, just to move up there and see if I could, find some work up there. As a young lawyer. And yeah, I mean, not surprisingly, there weren't a lot of like law firms hiring up there. I mean, you kind of got to wait. There's few and far between those kind of jobs.
A lot of family practices up there. A lot of
it's a smaller town, and back then it was even smaller than it is now. I think there's like 50,000 people back in the mid '90s, and so I tried to apply to be a bartender and landscaping and everything.
So you went from law school to be you passed the bar, and you're applying to be a bartender. You're applying to be a landscaper just because you love the area so much.
I knew I wanted to move there. I figured I just got to bide my time until an opportunity up there. But the problem was I didn't factor in that it's a college town up there, NAU, and all of those jobs were already taken by. And if I had a resume, I'd show it to somebody. They'd be like, "We can't, you're overqualified, like be a landscaper, So I couldn't get a job, and I was living up in the Monte Vista Hotel up there downtown.
So you're overqualified, and you can't get a landscaping job.
Can't get a job doing anything.
The college kids are taking all your jobs.
Totally, yeah. And I was kind of almost run out of money, and in fact had to borrow $500 just to kind of keep things going for a few more days. And I'm like, this, I was starting to really think this isn't going to work, But when I drove out here to Arizona from Ohio, and on my way I went down the switchbacks there down to Sedona as I, instead of going down the 17 because I wanted to, just check out Sedona. I'd seen it before, and I think it's beautiful like everybody else does. And there's that area you can pull off. It's a scenic overlook, and then you've got a lot of Native Americans, Navajo and Hopi. They're selling jewelry and other kind of artwork and stuff like that. And somehow I had started talking to this one woman. Her name was Ella Bedoni. And I told her, who I was, what was going on. And she said, it's that. She goes, that's interesting. We have an attorney that's from Ohio, grew up in Ohio, and he's like part of our family. He helped us out with this. He's helping us with this big relocation case. And let me give you his card. She wrote her number or her name on and gave it to me. So
it was an Ohio connection.
And I tucked it away, and I was up there. I thought, maybe this guy can help me. I'll just go in and talk to him. So I made an appointment just to go in, and he basically did he divided his time between criminal defense and this big case where they were wanting to forcibly relocate 353 Navajo families from their ancestral homeland.
Wow!
So it was without getting into too much detail about that, which I thought was very interesting
admirable
and compelling
sure,
work. So I made an appointment. I went in there. He goes, I'm not sure what why you're here. You don't have any problems, right? And I'm like, no, I do. I said, I'm trying to find a job. So we ended up talking for a year. Turned out we went to the same college, Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And his best friend was the brother of kind of my mentor professor in college.
Yeah.
And so we're talking for like an hour or so. He's got a stack of resumes on his desk because back then it was like Dances with Wolves.
Right.
And it was a big romantic thing. And so everybody from Harvard and Yale and stuff, they all wanted to come out and be a part of this cool case, And he's like, I don't have time to look. He ends up taking the resumes. He just slides them off into his trash, and he goes, why don't you just work for me?
Jesus Christ.
I couldn't believe it, man. Yeah. I mean, I literally, the one time that when I left there, I had to pinch myself. I did literally pinch myself because I'm like, did this just happen?
So there's a stack of resumes, and I said, fuck it, I'm not going through these. I'm hiring you right here.
He's like, you're here, and we're getting along. He's like, why don't you just work for me? So that's how I started here in
That's
Arizona.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it was good.
But it was an Ohio connection, huh?
Ohio connection, yeah.
You came out here with no connections.
Right. Yeah.
Trying to make it.
It was kind of miraculous.
You had to have that one from home to get you in there. But they got your foot in the door.
So to answer your question, though, so he was doing a lot of criminal defense. And of course, there's a lot of marijuana cases involved, especially when you're up there on the I-40 because there's a lot of transportation cases. Right. And this was before any medical marijuana.
Right.
So I started doing these cases, and I'd already known how bad it was to be a cannabis consumer. I'd had bad experiences with cops. My friends had.
So you were a consumer at this time?
Yeah. Okay. And had been and had run-ins, and my friends too, with police harassing, that kind of thing. And So but in representing people charged with these more serious kind of offenses, I realized just how devastating marijuana prohibition was, not just in criminal in the sense of facing prison, but losing jobs and children and all the other devastating implications of choosing to even just consume cannabis.
Right.
A lot of college kids up there getting busted for possession and stuff like that. So I got more into it. I joined the NORML Legal Committee, which is a group of lawyers around the country.
So how'd you hear about them? Like in High Times magazine, or?
Well, I'd always knew about NORML.
Okay.
And we had a good active chapter in Ohio that I'd gone to.
Okay, so you were already starting to be okay.
Yeah. That went back to college days when I first started being kind of tuning into the need for marijuana policy reform, and so I joined up with them. Would get their newsletter. That was when they used to send it out in the actual mail and everything. And I got more and more interested in it, and long story short, I turned out that I went to a couple conferences. We have our annual conference in Key West every December, and I just went to the one this last month. And so Lee Phillips, this attorney who hired me, took us down there.
Oh, that's cool. So you convinced him, hey, cannabis is important, or was he already?
He already knows, and he's still he's an attorney in practice, and marijuana is an important area
of his criminal defense.
Of his criminal defense,
Okay.
yeah. And he won a big the big racial profiling case on interstate transportation cases, driving while black, driving while brown, a few years ago.
That's awesome.
Against the DPS, but it was actually a settlement, but it was a
still
settlement.
It's a win. Yeah.
So when I went down there, I realized, okay, this is my tribe, these lawyers. And so it was 1996. California had just passed, and I remember this experience where I'm down there. The event is at the Pier House Resort, and I come walking in. My girlfriend was with me. I came walking back from being out on Duval Street, which is the kind of party street, in Key West, and there was sitting Bill Panzer, who had been one of the chief drafters of the California's medical initiative that had just passed. Tony Serra, who is a hero of mine. He's an attorney with a practice in San Francisco. James Woods played him in a movie called True Believer.
Okay.
And, he's got long gray hair. He represented the Black Panthers back in the 60s. And Keith Straub, the founder of NORML.
So some power players there.
Right. And I'm like, so my girlfriend, she wants to go, she's tired, whatever. I go, okay, I'm going to chill out here.
Yeah,
so I sit
out.
down and go, hey, guys, we're sitting around at chairs around the pool. And Tony says, anyone got any weed? And I'm like, no one had any. I'm like, I did. I had brought the.
That's what I was always the guy with weed too.
So I pull it out, and I'm like, well, I got this, and I passed it to Tony. He's like, oh, this is that's a nice, juicy one. And so there I sat with these three guys.
Because you had weed with you.
And I'm just a young attorney, and I'm thinking, where's there to go from here? I've reached the zenith. Is what I felt like. I'm sitting with these guys, and of course they're a great guy. And that kind of really got me into it. So in any event, 1998. Fast forward, NORML ended up their litigation director was leaving, and there was an open position, and they ended up hiring me.
Oh wow!
And so I had the honor of serving as the litigation director for NORML for 4 years in their headquarters in Washington, D.C.
So that comes with a salary and everything?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Salary, everything. An office. We were right on Farragut Square, which is the square, 1 square away from Lafayette Park, which is the White House is on Lafayette Park. So right down in the middle of it, D.C. is where NORML had their offices. At the time, they're in a different location now, but. Yeah, so did that.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool.
So you went from struggling in Flagstaff to working on the front lines in Washington, huh?
Right, yeah, and of course that was a fascinating job. It was just, and that really solidified my commitment to really wanting to be a cannabis lawyer, committed to not just representing people who are in trouble for cannabis, but committed to policy reform.
Yeah, right.
Because everybody there, that's what they're doing. But they were the only only ones on the block back then.
Yeah. So this is 1996.
Yeah,
You're
98.
98. You're in DC.
Yeah.
Are you starting to see now from there the reform laws you tried passing? Now it's 2020. Are you seeing those take form? Have they started happening?
Definitely. I mean, certainly with it beginning in 1996 with California and medical in Arizona actually too, but our legislature, our government refused to implement. We passed our medical marijuana law before California, the same day, but we tallied the votes faster.
Yeah, sure.
And but never got enacted. So, but that's when that was after that that was the first domino.
Right.
And I think that.
So I'm getting the fuck out of here. First off,
yeah. Well, yeah, right. That was also I was so disillusioned with what happened here in 1996, but and so
just so our viewers know, what happened was they passed medical marijuana in Arizona in 1996. And then the government came and said, that's not right. The people don't need medical marijuana, and they stopped that.
That's right.
So you guys had to come back in 1998
So in 1998, directly in response to that, then an initiative amending our Constitution was passed, which is called the Voter Protection Act.
Which they cannot overturn those once
they can't veto. They must implement it. The legislature may not modify unless it furthers the purpose of the initiative and it's passed by a supermajority. Yeah, that kind of.
So I just wanted to make sure that our viewers understood that. Let's go back to what you were.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a critical. The Arizona Voter Protection Act is so important, and that was the basis for a couple of years ago the case I had that you might remember involving the legislature's attempt to recriminalize patient possession on college campuses.
Right.
It was that Voter Protection Act that was the winning argument there.
Wow, that's great.
But so so the domino. I mean, progress has been so rapid, really, in the last 25 years compared to the 25 years before it. I mean, Keith Stroup, the founder of NORML. And NORML was founded, by the way, with a $10,000 check from Hugh Hefner.
Oh wow! So Playboy funded.
Playboy was the
NORML.
Yeah, that was the seed capital.
That's one. I wonder if Michael Weiser knows that, because he said that's where he first learned about Keith Stroup was in Playboy magazine. So I wonder if that.
Probably, I'm sure he knows. If he didn't, I'm sure he knows. I
wonder if that connects. Yeah. That's interesting.
And so so Keith in 1970. That's when he founded NORML. Had announced that he was certain that marijuana would be legalized nationwide no later than 1975.
Okay.
So a little slower progress than we thought, but there was some progress though. There was 13 states decriminalized throughout the 80s, late 70s and 80s. That was some progress. But other than that, it took all that time to 1996.
Wow.
So the progress in the last 25 years compared to the 25 years before.
So 1970, when did Nixon come into?
Well, so Carter was elected in 1976.
Okay.
Because Reagan then was elected in 1980.
Okay. So
Nixon's second term began in 72. His first term in 68.
So he came right in the middle of that Nixon administration.
Yeah, right.
So he's like, we're gonna change this in 5 years.
Well, that's right. And it was encouraging because Nixon had put together a blue ribbon committee of leading scientists to research and investigate, the harms of marijuana, and that blue ribbon committee ended up coming back to Nixon and saying there are no harms, and it should be legalized, it should be decriminalized.
Right.
At which point he disbanded that blue ribbon committee and completely ignored the findings.
Right.
But that was encouraging, and I'm sure.
Which he said no. So that became the ultimate fight against drugs right there. Mm-hmm. And that's when he said, hey, we're going to change this in 5 years. And that's when all that became.
Then,
Because I know Carter wasn't that bad on it, but
no,
he just kind of turned his back to it. It seemed like he was more focused on other things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he had a lot going on. I mean, he was, though, famous for saying that the worst thing about smoking marijuana is getting caught.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah.
It's still true today, which is, definitely the worst that can happen to you. And even by your parents,
Right.
Even being 40 and being by your parents.
Something's wrong when that's the
it's still the same.
When that's that's the worst part. Then that's something's upside down. At that point. Yeah.
So you're back out there in 98 in Washington. Are you seeing some of these? How are the other politicians treating you guys? Let's go there.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there was some interesting things going on in D.C. at the time because they then passed in 1998 their medical. The district did.
Oh, so they had medical since 98?
Well, they have, but here's what happened. Congress has plenary power, as they call it, total power to veto anything that is passed at the district level. And they did. They vetoed their medical marijuana law. So there's the main group that was responsible was a group called ACT UP DC. And they approached me at the time that I was litigation director at NORML. Litigation director, legal directions, they're the same difference.
A lot of L's.
And asked me to be their legal director, and I agreed. And so what we did was we sent letters to every member of the district council and the police chief and the mayor. And we told them that our intent was to operate an underground medical marijuana distribution.
Oh, wow.
And they said, you won't have it. As far as we're concerned, that's what our constituents want. We can't guarantee that you're not going to have problems with the federal law enforcement, but as far as us and the DC police, you won't have any problems.
So you
from us.
went to the cops first and said, we're going to sell weed.
And they said, that's fine with us.
Wow.
So medical marijuana has been active in DC since then.
So you were part of that first.
Yeah, but it was underground for many years. And then when they passed it again, Congress allowed it to go into effect. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of counties in California were too when it first, well, still even now, but a lot of has said no to the medical marijuana shops. They were raiding them, shutting them down.
Yeah.
It was a lot of gray areas still at that point.
For sure.
So they had to go a lot of the hand-to-hand.
Yeah, definitely. And that's usually how it is, at least early
even
on.
Even Arizona started that way. Yeah. There's a lot of hand-to-hand. You just came from the Earl Cup, which was seems still not too far from
right. Well, yeah. But yeah, so that's it's been very interesting and meaningful to be involved in at this juncture in history where we're seeing such rapid progress.
Yeah. Do you think technology has a lot to do with that? The word's getting out faster.
I can't imagine. I gotta believe that's the case.
People getting pulled over with their smartphones. You see these videos coming out. It's just the cop can't keep it silent much longer.
Definitely that, and I would think social media also. I think has just the fact that people can talk about it and find one another and make those connections and organize. Yeah.
I have a podcast called Toking Today. And put it out there. Control the narrative. That's the great thing about the age we're living in is if it's not on TV, make a station.
Yeah.
We can put it out there. Might be only 7 people watching it, but those 7 people might know, hey, there's a difference, and it is better than those other alternatives.
Absolutely, because the mainstream media, even still today, is so hesitant or unwilling to give marijuana a fair discussion. I mean, they just wouldn't ever, and so now that's changed a little, but it's still a big problem. Mainstream media's willingness to talk about marijuana in any kind of a favorable light. I mean, it was what's his name over at CNN, that Dr. Gupta.
Sanjay Gupta.
That was the first time that anyone ever in mainstream media discussed marijuana in a positive light.
Right. It wasn't a stoner filled, in a basement cutting up weed. Nothing.
Well,
it was,
and I'll tell you. Let me tell you this. I didn't mean to. This is interesting because it's pertinent to what we're talking about right now. But when I was a legal director at NORML, Salon.com broke a story. They had discovered that there is this program where how television networks have to have a certain number of public service announcement minutes.
Okay.
They don't get paid. They have to do it for free. It's airtime.
Right. Yeah.
Well, what they were doing was if they agreed to include anti-marijuana messaging in their program content, the drug czar's office would review it and free up a certain number of minutes that they could then sell to advertisers. This is a multi-million-dollar deal.
So they got money for putting anti-weed into their...
and this was in everything. Sitcoms, dramas, I mean, across the board.
Well, Punky Brewster had a joint offer tour, all those shows.
All the networks were doing it. NBC, ABC, Fox, Warner Brothers, all of them were in on it. And the problem was, so Keith, we sat down. He showed me the article. He goes, Keith is a master at spotting issues and that we can take action on. So he said this is not consistent with anti-payola law. And I'm like, he goes, there's nowhere they're not they're not, because the salon broke the program, but missed the legal issue, which was they're not saying it in the credits that portions of this program were paid for by the drug czar's office, the National Office for Drug Policy Control, the drug czar's office. So, or a partnership for a drug-free America. You know? So I filed a complaint with the FCC, and there's a published decision on it, and they agreed. They said, yeah, this is something of value. These minutes translate into something of value. And I was up against lawyers from New York, big time lawyers, entertainment lawyers representing these networks. You can only imagine. Right? But I had them. I mean, I had them. So I filed this complaint. We won, shut down the entire program. But man, when you wouldn't believe, there was 2 wheelbarrows full of, because I filed a FOIA first, a Freedom of Information Act, for all the information from Congress, and not from Congress, but from the drug czar's office, and they brought over 2 wheelbarrows full of documents. This had been going on for a while, and so we ended that. And their only argument, really, that they could come up with against, why the FCC should allow the program to continue was that if they said that if these networks announced that they had paid for the content, that people wouldn't
take it seriously.
Yeah. And it's like, well,
no shit.
That's
the point.
Yeah, that's the point.
We got you. That's the whole.
Yeah. So that was kind of a cool thing. But DC, and you also asked, what was it like down there politically, like in Congress? Now, I had a girlfriend from Ohio that she ended up, she was worked in Ohio for the county attorney there, a guy by the name of Steve LaTourette. He then got elected to the House. And he was down there. He's a Republican down in D.C., representing the district that I grew up in Ohio. So I was talking to her. She started inviting me to his fundraisers and stuff there on Capitol Hill. So I'd go there, and there'd be senators and representatives, both sides of the aisle. Because, I'm sure you realize, once the cameras are off, these guys are, it doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, they're all in the same country club, Yeah,
they're getting the bar, they're getting the drink at the same bar. Yeah.
And so they'd come up, but Steve would make jokes. He'd say, oh, if we run out of beer, Dean can get us a bag of weed or something. It's like, haha. And these guys would come up, though, Republicans and Democrats, and say, things like, hey, man, you're doing really important work. And personally, I really think that, this has to be legalized, but I can't say that because of my if I say that, they're going to kill me. So I can't publicly say that, or but if anyone asks me about that, I'll deny it. So they were already there. In the late '90s, on both sides of the aisle.
Why would they publicly deny it, you think? What?
Just because of political consequences.
Bring the mic up a little bit.
Just because of the political consequences. There we go.
Yeah.
But they were, from what people had come up and talked to me, they were very much in support of what we were trying to do with marijuana policy reform personally.
Wow. So you think the political consequences, you're talking about losing their jobs, if they support weed, are they going to go to, what's like the worst thing that's going to happen to these guys?
Not get elected.
So they just lose their position.
Yeah, because then it wasn't, Democrats and Republicans were all on this war on drugs bandwagon.
Right.
And if you show that you're weak on marijuana, that just gives your opponent an amazing, because this is still the reefer madness days.
So do you think in the last 30 years, with the older generations falling off and whatnot, and the newer generations coming up and voting, do you think that that we're going to start seeing more cannabis minded senators coming?
Oh, I think absolutely. We see bipartisan. The budget amendment that prohibits funding for enforcing federal marijuana laws against persons who are in compliance, persons or businesses that are acting in compliance with their state medical marijuana act. That's been passed it's a bipartisan bill passed now. The last coming up on, this will be the 5th year.
Oh, wow.
So there's almost no consequence to saying that you're even.
So So when they start coming out, I'm sure you worked with a lot of these guys who were getting into Congress. That were ordering the cannabis from you. Back in Washington. These guys are now, they've been working as interns and whatnot. Now they're working their ways up.
Yeah.
So they've got to be coming up more, cannabis minded.
Oh, for sure.
So, I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyways, you work with some pretty smart minded guys. I mean, did you ever run into like Bernie Sanders out there working in?
I never ran into Bernie. No. He was there, but I never ran into him, or if I ever saw him anyhow, I didn't recognize him or know who he was, or So
okay.
But I know I don't recall ever meeting him in any of those events.
Who were some of the celebrities at the time? Come into the room, everybody turn and have to look,
Gosh, let me try to remember. Back then, I mean, these were the days of the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
So if you want to think in terms of like to place it in time, the Clinton impeachment.
Yeah.
And you had the stars on both sides. I mean, you had Kennedy back then. Of course, he was a big star.
Yeah.
Biden even back then was kind of an acolyte there. With his sort of that smile of his. It's just you can't forget it once you see it. And and we still had all the characters from, I think, really the Reagan Bush years were still, a lot of them were still there in Congress. So in this, there's there are still a few that are still. I mean, you even had your, I believe, like Strom Thurmond and Byrd and some of these guys who aren't around anymore that were really the old guard. I mean, Ku Klux Klan member. Stuff like that. Like really, from a different.
So those guys, they're coming out though. They're seeing the weed out. So that's why I was saying with the cannabis coming in. Those generations have to eventually go away. So as things start to change, it didn't take 5 years, it didn't take 20 years, but over the next 50 years, we're starting to see the change.
For
happen.
sure.
Yeah.
It's accelerating, I think, exponentially now. And I think it's a combination of factors. We've talked about social media, also just the medical marijuana now. I mean, literally.
Somebody knows somebody who's smoking weed.
Yeah, and the sky hasn't fallen.
Right.
No one's jumping out of windows, and Mexicans in blacks aren't riding in the street like zombies. These are the kind of like racist metaphors that were being used to scare people away from marijuana policy reform.
But what happened was we started seeing zombies in the streets and stuff because they were getting bath salts and spices and stuff that weren't weed, that weren't illegal, that they could buy over the counter.
And that was then the fallback argument is the whole gateway thing. Like somehow,
now it's still weed's fault.
It's still weed's fault.
It's its fault because it's illegal. It's the problem. Yeah. So when things like these bath salts and stuff that you can buy legally and operate a vehicle under and whatnot that they don't say anything against, and then the people are getting arrested for having cannabis in their car, getting their families taken away. Are you seeing some of these? What are you seeing as an attorney? What's some of the heart-wrenching
these days?
Stuff? Yeah.
And the thing about cannabis is that it's so much easier to interdict than any other substance. It's bulky and it stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it stinks. I think it smells great, but it has a pungent odor.
Right.
So it's really easy, and quite frankly, law enforcement they much prefer, I think, to bust cannabis, like transporters or people who are engaged in the unlicensed sale and so forth, because by and large, marijuana consumers aren't violent, aren't a problem. And this is why we have so many people in prison, because gosh, if you were a prison guard or a prison warden, would you want your prison full of people who are like violent offenders and sex offenders, or a bunch of people who are in there for marijuana offenses? They're easier to manage. So
it just makes business sense.
It just makes business sense. And these days, you see still some of the same. Back in Arizona, is a conduit, I-40, for the transportation of marijuana. That still happens, although it's different now. Back then, a lot of it was coming from Mexico and from large-scale outdoor grows in California. So the average load in a trunk would be several hundred pounds. And now, typically, we're seeing more like 20 to 50 pounds because it's more being grown in smaller hydroponic type indoor grows. So we're still seeing a lot of that, though. And it used to also be primarily it would really excel, the number of the people getting busted would really dramatically increase around November, December, January,
right,
which is like
harvest
harvest
season.
time.
Yeah,
Now it's not doesn't really.
it's all the
there is
time.
no season.
Yeah.
So that's different. And then of course, now we still have everything that we had then. We have what I don't call them illegal marijuana sales. I just call them unlicensed.
Right.
Unlicensed marijuana sales, unlicensed cultivation, that kind of thing. So it's still, and even in some ways, it's even maybe more prevalent than it was before because there's so many more people who can openly engage in the
Right.
use if they're patients.
Right. So they can come by from an illegal grow and still use it legally. So it encourages illegal grows.
It does, and especially when you have a situation like we have here in Arizona, where the
patient can't grow.
The industry is artificially restricted.
Right.
So and then if Smart and Safe passes in November, which I hope that it does,
Okay.
we're going to go from a couple 100,000 patients to every adult over the age of 21 who's now able to consume, but not significantly increasing the number of dispensaries where they can get this. That's going to explode the black market. I don't see how there's any way around it. If they're not allowing a free market, then there's going to be a black market. So I expect that the question I get a lot is, well, you're an attorney who you represent cannabis people, mostly criminal defense related stuff. I do some business too, but business law areas too, but primarily criminal defense. If you legalize, what are you going to do for work? Well, in my experience, and I think this is the experience of other lawyers around the country who criminal defense lawyers who handle cannabis cases, it actually increases because you suddenly now it's not illegal to possess and consume, and you have a restricted number of licenses that can legally sell it.
Right.
So while prosecutions against consumers drops off,
you're going to see a lot of business
prosecutions for sales and cultivation and transportation, that sort of thing, pick up. I obviously would love to see all of that go away. My personal opinion is that all nonviolent marijuana related offenses should be at least decriminalized.
And then you would be out of business.
Then then I'd have to legalize something else. I got plenty of stuff on my list. Believe me.
Oh yeah. So what's the next? You think mushrooms? You think psilocybin? Those type of things?
I personally am not. I'm not a believer in any form of. I'm like Abraham Lincoln, am against any form of prohibition on individual consumption. Or individual activity, economic activity, commercial activity, because it never works.
Right.
Never. It always ends up making everything worse than what it was. We talk about, we sort of nostalgically look back at the years, the beginning of America, the founding fathers, how great we were back then and everything. Well, there was all drugs were legal back then.
Right.
Opium, marijuana, all of it.
Yeah.
Our founding fathers, as everyone, a lot of people know now, were growing it.
Yeah.
The first draft of Declaration of Independence was printed on it.
Right.
So it was a huge commercial crop, both industrially and also, it was in medicines. It was in, and we didn't have an FDA that restricted prescriptions and everything. So it was out there.
Do you think the FDA is a useless government branch?
They are quite clearly. Just
a money grab.
They're an agent of the pharmaceutical industry, for sure, for sure, and they take their marching orders from the DEA.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was I don't want to say a money laundering place, but that's the only thing that comes to mind is we're going to take money from this part, put it in this part, and give it to this part.
Yeah.
It just kind of filters through. It seems.
It's bad. The fact that marijuana is still a Schedule I substance, when the science is there's so many studies now that show that there's medical value, and so many studies that show that it's not addictive, it's not harmful, which are the two categories for a Schedule I substance: high potential for abuse and no medicinal value.
Right.
It's crazy. So
obviously.
So.
Which is crazy.
And that's the DEA, by the way, not the FDA. The DEA is the one that decides whether to reschedule
right.
something. But
The FDA is if you can put it in your food or not.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the thing with the CBD and whatnot. They're saying that it's not being allowed to be put in food or whatever because it will eat your liver. Or, there's all this other things when they have aspartame and all this other shit going into these foods, which is pretty amazing that they specifically targeted CBD when they're trying to make it more commercial. But are you seeing any hemp cases come through on your side?
I am now. We're starting to see that. That's going to be there's going to be a lot of litigation, both commercial litigation and in criminal defense work in the hemp. I mean, there's some really serious issues. Like I had a guy a month ago come and see me. The cops had he's a licensed grower in Oregon, and hemp grower, and they ended up seizing 300 pounds of hemp flower from him.
Wow!
Because there's no way to test for
percentages
THC in the field. And in fact, like the DEA, and I think this is beginning to change, but the DEA has never been willing to do percent tests at all.
So a lot of that stuff could have been hemp back in the day too, that they got prosecuted for. And
yeah. I mean, the hemp exemption in federal the Controlled Substance Act and in pretty much every state's version of their Controlled Substance Act is that the hemp exemption was that the there was the definition of marijuana did not include, like for example here in Arizona, the mature stalk and the sterilized seeds incapable of germination.
Right.
So that's been always part of our law. There's been a hemp exemption. That's why we have, we've always had, it's expensive, but you can buy hemp paper, hemp textiles, hemp silk blends, that kind of thing. So it's never, but now it's any part of the plant, not just the mature stalk and sterilized seeds. It's any part of the plant as long as the percent THC is no greater than 0.3%. At least that's the federal definition. But as people are starting to find out, hemp is still illegal in every state in the United States. But it's also legal but it's only in the way that they make it legal. And every state does that a little bit differently.
Okay.
For example, and this is an issue in hemp that's going to be a problem. There's in Arizona's law, in the definition of a couple of definitions that are pertinent here. One is a definition of a hemp processor. That's a type of license. You take the raw hemp and you turn it into something.
Right.
A hemp processor. That's what they are. The definition is that they are authorized to produce hemp products, quote unquote. Hemp products is defined in our hemp law here in Arizona as pretty much anything. It's got actually a long list of various types of products, plastics and all that. Oh. But then it says, except that, the last sentence in that definition says, except that if it's intended for ingestion, and it doesn't limit that to human ingestion, so arguably animal ingestion too. If it's intended for ingestion, that it's limited to the sterilized seeds.
Oh, wow.
In other words,
so anything you ingest in Arizona has to be made from seeds.
Which there's no CBD in seeds.
Right.
So by definition, if you got a CBD pen, that if vaping is a form of ingestion,
right,
which I think arguably it is. I don't think ingestion really is limited to gastrointestinal, then we've got an issue there. We've got a problem. And I brought this up to the advisory committee, and they said, yeah, a couple of them said, yeah, I know that was an issue we were concerned about, but the Department of Agriculture people said, we're not worried about it because the law enforcement is going to understand, what we're trying to do here, which is a very naive statement. But they're, what do they know about law enforcement? They're, a regulatory agency has really no involvement with law enforcement. So we're starting to see now people getting busted. And the other thing is hemp flower. You have that, it's all over the place, smoke shops and stuff like that. Well, if that statute is limiting only the seeds can be ingested, then, what about these flowers? And we're starting to see now people getting busted because the cop pulls them over and they have, hemp flower. You can't tell the difference.
Uh-huh.
You've seen it. It looks just like marijuana flower. It smells the same way. It feels the same way. There's no way to tell a difference. So we're at the stage now where people are starting to get busted for it, and now we're trying to figure out, okay, they're come to see me, for example, and they say, well, it was hemp. It wasn't marijuana. Okay, now I guess we got to figure out how we prove that.
Right.
If that's our defense, to my knowledge, it's never happened yet. We haven't had a hemp defense yet, but we're at the stage where you're going to start seeing that happen. Yeah. Because they flash test it in the field, it's positive for marijuana.
Yeah.
And it's in the burden. It's interesting because the burden is going to be on the person charged.
Right.
To once the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that it's of the genus plant material.
There's THC in it. Once there's THC in it.
Yeah. Or no, it's not defined as THC. In Arizona, it's anything of the genus cannabis.
Okay.
So once they prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, which they do with a test result,
right,
then the burden will shift to the defendant to prove that's true, but it contained less than 0.3% THC.
Right.
The problem is they won't release it to test it because they say that would violate the Federal Controlled Substances Act. These police departments say that they can only turn it over to a DEA certified laboratory to do the testing. Problem is the DEA certified laboratories, at least as recently, the last time I kind of did a nationwide check on this was a couple years ago, but they refused to do percent testing.
Yeah.
So what do? I'll tell you how it's played out in a case. It wasn't a hemp case, but it was a case in the medical marijuana law here in Arizona. A client of mine had gotten their house raided, and they found like 4 pounds of powdered marijuana that they were putting in capsules and taking because they believed it was beneficial for blood pressure.
So is this the full plant ground up?
It was only the leaves ground up.
Okay.
Now, you couldn't tell that from looking at it probably, but so I said to the prosecutor, listen, this isn't their medical marijuana patients. The weight restriction, the allowable amount of 2.5 ounces only applies to usable marijuana, which is defined as the dried flower only. So every other part of the plant is exempt from that weight limitation. So I said, and this was made from leaf material, release some to me. And what I did was I said, okay, tell you what, go do what you just did. Go over to AZ Med Test, you remember them?
Yeah.
And have them do a test on the flour and then the powdered material that you had. And it came back like 15%. That was the flour, and it was like whatever, like 1% or something was the leaf, 2% or something was the leaf material. So clearly, and I showed him. I said, "Here's the study. This is like a study we did on some other material, just like it. This is what if you do this, if you release this to me, I believe that this is going to be what it shows, same percent level on the leaf material." And they refused to release it to me because of the Wickenburg Police Department, because of the Controlled Substance Act. And I said, well, then you have to get it tested. And we searched nationwide. I talked to attorneys from all over the country. They all agreed the DEA the labs will not do testing for percentage.
Wow.
So I said, so when that was impossible, I said, all right, well, then let's go to trial. And then you can explain to the jury why, when my client said this is not usable marijuana, you refuse to do the testing, and let's see what happens. So they dismissed the case because obviously that would not fly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's my question about that.
Yeah.
So I use the vaporizer here.
Mm-hmm.
I put my ground up cannabis into a little capsule here, and it vaporizes it, and then I dump out the vape weed into here. So this is all my vaped cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
This is useless, right?
Well, useless as far as being able to have any kind of a psychoactive effect. Yeah.
Well.
Or medicinal effect.
I plan on turning this into butter.
Okay. Well, so there's still something in there.
There might be. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Probably there might be.
But if I was to get raided and they took this whole thing and they tested it.
Yeah. So that is. I'm assuming it's not trim.
No, it's actual ground up
flower
bud. Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't matter, and that's a good point. And
it's ashes. If I was to throw away all the ashes over time. and not throw it away. Just dump it,
Well, the definition of marijuana under the criminal code it has nothing to do with THC. It just has to do with is this material from a plant of the genus cannabis.
Right.
So that is plant material from a plant of the genus cannabis. The fact that it may not have any more THC in it is irrelevant.
So because I kept this, now I'm illegal. Now it's illegal.
Well, you may now at this point be able to refer to it as hemp, though.
Well,
if it's got less than 0.3%.
But once
THC,
again, they're not going to test it or whatever. we just discussed.
So
my thing is, I mean, I bought it. I have a 2.5 ounce limit. I can't buy more than 2.5 ounces at a time.
Yeah.
But when I dump it into this after I use it, it's there. It's still there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I didn't throw it in the garden. I didn't throw it in the trash.
Right.
I put it in this jar.
Yeah. So
does that make me a criminal?
Well, there certainly are law enforcement and prosecuting agencies that would consider it to be illegal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, I mean, that's a good argument towards a lot of this usable cannabis law because it's not, I mean, to me, it's no longer usable.
Right.
But if I give it to you or give it to Wisniewski, he'll eat that.
Okay, yeah.
And he'll get Medicaid off of that.
Two definitions of usable are pertinent, though. One is the definition under the criminal code because it does have to be usable marijuana. But what that means is not that it could have any psychoactive effect, but just essentially, is it capable of being combusted? So
sure.
The issue of whether this would be a new issue, though, I could argue that at trial that this isn't usable because even though it can burn, it's not usable because there's no THC in it.
Well, no, because here's another thing. When I was in Los Angeles as a young struggling actor, I would go to set and I would put the vape stuff into cigarette tubes and I would smoke that and it would get me by.
Right.
I don't know if that's getting me high or if it's usable, but it got me by. You know, I used it.
The definition under the criminal code, again, people usable just means anything that's it has to it's not a matter of its psychoactive effect whether it's usable. It's always been defined to mean whether it's capable of producing like smoke,
Well, that definitely would.
And then the other definition is that which is under the Medical Marijuana Act, and the definition there is just, is it dried flower?
Well, if I turn it into butter, then that's not usable because I can't burn it.
Well, it's the definition is the full definition under the Medical Marijuana Act.
I'll get to this. I'll get to the point.
Is the dried flower and any mixture or preparation thereof.
Okay.
And under Jones, the Jones Supreme Court case, Davy Jones, that definition includes any kind of an extract.
Okay. So if I was to scrape my bong and get more than 2.5 ounces.
Theoretically, yes, that would be considered a narcotic drug, and because it would be in excess of your if it came from flower,
right?
Then it's just been,
it's been vaporized and
turned into a different form. Yeah, it's still, so that's basically an extract, or it's a mixture or preparation of.
Keep your bong clean because it's a felony.
Yeah.
If you don't.
Well, I mean, I don't know anybody who's got 2.5 ounces of resin.
Yeah, see my bong. So. We used to make bong resin balls. I mean, that thing was. I used to get some pretty big ones.
It's like hash.
Yeah.
So and so hash is subject. Now the big issue though is, okay, well, what if I made my hash from leaves instead of flowers? What if I made it from trim?
Well, yeah.
If trim doesn't have any, weight limit under the Medical Marijuana Act, then why would any, wax or any other form of extract that I made from it all of a sudden have a weight restriction? I think there's a good argument that it does.
Well, that's the issue I'm having with edibles here. Is this 500 milligram edible? It costs me 5 grams at Health for Life. But if I go to Yilo and I buy a 500 milligram edible, it costs me 0.5 grams on my limit. Is there any legal
one of the
thought behind that, or
one of the implications of the Jones case, and for maybe I should just explain that real quick what Jones was.
Yeah, for our listeners here.
Yeah, for the listeners, Jones was a case. A guy got busted up in Yavapai County, a patient, for being in possession of a very small amount of wax, and the argument that Sheila Polk, the county attorney up there in Yavapai, who's very anti-marijuana, anti-medical marijuana, made was that that marijuana, the definition of marijuana in the Medical Marijuana Act, does not include concentrates, and it's true that those are treated differently under our criminal code. There's marijuana, and then anything that's an extract I think wax, hash, butter is considered a narcotic drug,
Right.
And they're treated a little bit differently. Well, she said since that distinction is made in the criminal code, then obviously when they define marijuana without specifically including concentrates, they must not have meant to include. And the Court of Appeals went along with that, and unfortunately, Rodney Jones ended up doing time because of this. We won at the Supreme Court, but he'd already been released at that point. But in what we won, so the Supreme Court said no, that concentrates are included in medical marijuana, but that the amount of concentrates that you're allowed to possess is limited to what can be produced by your allowable amount.
Right.
2.5 ounces. So if you're a patient, you can't have 2.5 ounces of wax. And that used to be kind of the way we thought of it. It was 2.5 ounces of marijuana and or Now there's this whole allotment ratio thing.
Oops.
And that was the
Is that official?
Oh, that's official. Yeah. So now what happened is the Department of Health Services is doing studies now to try and arrive at what that allotment is. Is it,
Well, this goes back to that case because I vaporized my cannabis out of that deal.
Yeah.
And this is no longer usable. I threw this away. But if I give it to Wisniewski, he can use that. And so, therefore, I would have to take it off his limit if he ate that. Okay. Because it's now usable to him.
You would.
We both got something usable out of it.
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
So I got my 2.5 ounces out of it, and he got his 2.5 ounces out of it. But if I was to take the concentrate out of this and get 2.5 ounces of the concentrate, and I take that to me, and then I give him the flour, and he takes the 2.5 ounces of flour out of that, we both got 2.5 ounces out of that same thing. And therefore, now we have a 5 ounce whatever out of something that no longer.
And that is the way we used to think about it, but now it's not. It's and obviously it depends. Wax, the ratio for the allotment of flour to wax is going to be different than that of like flour to keef. Or flour to just hash.
But they're not giving you the flour that the keef came off of, or the flour that the hash came out of, or the leaf that that stuff came out of. So they're still keeping that.
Well, the dispensary, they don't have any kind of limitation on what they can possess and not possess. So,
but what you're saying is, if they're not giving me the full everything, they shouldn't be taking the full everything off of my allotment. If you're not giving me 2.5 ounces of flour to go with that 2.5 grams or whatever whatever that equals out to be, then I'm not getting the full allotment. So therefore,
but they're saying, the problem is as you suggested, you would be over your allowable amount because you'd then have 2.5 ounces of flour, which has already been used to,
But it came from that.
Yeah, but
so therefore my flour is weaker.
Right.
So I still have.
But you're right though. You can actually go from having 2.5 ounces, your allowable amount, and without adding anything extra, ending up with
5 ounces.
Double your
or whatever,
but over your amount,
right.
Over your amount because now you have a concentrate in addition to that. So that's absolutely though the implication of the Jones holding. And so the department now, working with the industry, is trying to arrive at because the industry wants to know, how much are we allowed to sell?
Yeah.
Without getting in trouble, without violating the regulations. And so the department's trying to answer that question for them. But the problem
it's 2.5 ounces.
But the problem is law enforcement, as I learned, is trying to do the same thing. So you have Detective Shea over with a BHO extraction lab over at the sheriff's office. And he's also doing all other kinds of methods of extraction, trying to figure out for himself what that ratio is. And it's different. His ratio is not very generous. The department's is. But so what's going to happen? What could happen here is you go to the dispensary, they sell you something within your allowable amount of wax, and you drive down the street and get pulled over by Detective Shea, who looks at what you have and say, no, that's
more than I can make.
That's more than you're allowed to have. Yeah, and that's where we're at right now.
Because what if I'm an extreme extractionist? I can pull everything out of this plant and get 5 grams where you can only get 2.
Well, that's true too. It depends a lot on how well you know what you're doing.
Yeah. or what's in it, because maybe my 2 grams is way more potent than your 5 grams.
Yeah. And again, that's what the thing, potency has nothing to do with any of these definitions.
That's the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
It really should go by the percent of THC. So if you get a 28% gram, you got 280 milligrams.
Mm-hmm.
We should be going by milligrams. How much milligrams?
I think so, but even then, we'd still have issues because we'd still have that problem of I have flour, I made concentrates, and you're still over
milligrams. If you go by milligrams, if I give you
so you're saying that you would still, the milligrams can't change.
Milligrams will not change.
So that would be a much more consistent.
Yes.
Way
If I have 2,500 milligrams a week, I can use I can get 10 grams of flour at 25%, or I can get 20 grams of flour at 12.5%.
And that is that idea should be the future.
There we go. Started right here on Toking Today. Tom Dean Chado.
Absolutely, we should be writing that into every initiative now.
It should be milligrams.
It should be milligrams, no matter what.
We're testing everything. We know the test results. We should know milligrams.
That's the answer to this
issue.
Dilemma that you're talking about is it's a milligram. It doesn't matter what form it's in. It's milligrams of THC. I agree. That would solve a lot of problems. I don't know why people aren't thinking along those lines yet.
We just started. We just came up with it.
So, all right. We just came up with it here. I mean, I'll tell you this. Safer Arizona. I'm working with Safer Arizona on a 2024 initiative.
Uh-huh.
I definitely want to see 2020's initiative pass. It's clearly, we have a lot more work to do after that.
Right.
And I'm going to definitely include the milligram definition that we're talking about here today.
Yeah.
And obviously that requires a robust testing.
Right. That's what we want.
Yeah.
We want robust testing. We want to know what's in that flour. We want to know what your milligrams are.
Exactly.
And that's how you know what you're getting.
Brilliant, man. Yep. If nothing else out of this conversation today, that's huge right there. Yeah. And we'll put it in there, and I'm going to give you credit for it.
All right, man. Happened at Toking Today, everybody. So our 2 viewers who are watching this saw it happen. I don't know. But yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, that's good. That's what we're trying to do, is find that resolution to this issue. Because if I go and I get 500 milligrams from someplace, it's not 5 grams. It's 500 milligrams, no matter where it's at. Right. 500 milligrams, 500 milligrams.
Very true.
And it should be the same with the flour. If I get 28% flour from one place and I get 12% from the other place, I should be getting charged for 28% here and 12% there. I should not be getting the same, because I have to smoke twice as much of that other flour.
Yeah. Right.
That's not fair to me.
Yeah. And so it's like, milligrams can neither be created or destroyed, right? So
it is what it is.
It's going to be either still it's over here or it's over here now, but it's not like you're going to add milligrams.
Nope.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's the bottom line.
It's good.
That's what it. Bam. Done. Awesome. We got it today. Toking Today. All right. So, man, I don't know. Do you want to end it on that note, or do you want to keep on going? We're an hour into this thing.
Well, we can go a little bit longer if you want.
I know you have things to do.
What time? No, I'm good.
You feeling good?
You promised me to get out of here you said by 1, and it's now 20 minutes to 1, so we got a little time. Yeah.
All right, brother. I don't want to hold you up.
If you're game, I'm game.
I like to end on a good note. That was a good fucking note.
That was a very good note, yeah.
But no, I know you're doing some other good things in the state, and what else do you want to?
Well, I founded an organization with a couple other attorneys called the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association. We're made up of lawyers, all fields. We kind of started talking about this. It's a great organization. I think we have about 80 attorney members now statewide. We do seminars, both for the public and for lawyers, for continuing education.
So you're speaking to lawyers about cannabis. Are you seeing a lot of them are on the fence, don't really know about cannabis, or are most of them smoking weed? There's
still
themselves?
A real lack of understanding, but it's getting better. I teach every year now for 5 years. I've taught at the Arizona Public Defenders Association annual conference. It's in Tempe. I teach marijuana defense updates to make sure at least the criminal defense lawyers are all, as best as I can, educated about how to defend a client who's a card holder. How to raise immunity, how to litigate immunity, all that is really important. Criminal defense lawyers, as usual, are a little more up to speed on medical marijuana law than business, family law, all these other areas of law. But it's beginning to change, and they're all employment law. These different areas that now touch on marijuana. but that's starting to change. So it's getting better, but there is still a lack of understanding, knowledge. Yeah.
Are the business lawyers seeing a lot of applicants and employees coming back for retribution against being fired for cannabis?
Yeah, that is so there is a protection in the Medical Marijuana Act for people, employees, against adverse action by their employers based on like a positive test.
Okay.
As long you have that protection, as long as you're not in possession of it or under the influence of it at the workplace.
Okay.
The other exception to it is if it's an employer who receives federal funding or a federal license, and that's dependent on them maintaining a drug-free workplace. That's also an exception, but that's very rare.
Right.
You know, so most employers are subject to this restriction. Now, the first case that was my case that I think ever addressed this provision in the Medical Marijuana Act, and it was within the context of unemployment insurance benefits, and it was against Goodwill Industries, which is a pretty big, you know, company here in America, based in Denver. And they refuse to recognize that we don't recognize, you know, we go by federal law, like as if they can choose. You know? And so we, you know, they don't have an employment protection provision in Colorado. So we do down here. And anyhow, my client, he got fired. He's a stocking clerk because of a positive test, no evidence that he's ever impaired or anything like that. And we won. And so Goodwill Industries then had to pay his uninsurance employment benefits. But I don't do employment wrongful termination litigation. That definitely is not my wheelhouse, you know. So, but there now I'm slipping my mind. There's a really good attorney who recently won a case against Walmart.
Oh wow.
Gosh, it's it'll come to me. But he's been winning good cases. So now finally employers are being held accountable in a bigger way. Yeah, by getting hit with these bigger judgments now.
Wow.
So that's starting to change because it has been thus far almost like employers just thumb their nose at the law. They don't care. They're like, do something about it, But now someone is, and Joshua Cardin is the name of the lawyer here in town. And he's winning these cases. So I think that, I'm starting to see more articles in my news feed about, aimed at employers so they can understand how to avoid these lawsuits. So it's the message is getting through. So I think we're going to start to see changes in policy. Yeah.
Well, that's good because that's, the employment, that's with the corporations, that's who's feeding Congress anyways.
Yeah,
so that's a good place to start changing that too and start seeing these changes. So yeah. That's a good change all around.
Yeah.
The mindset is changing.
Yeah. So for sure. So, and I mean, just maybe what good place to go to, though. I touched on 2024 and, I wish I had brought my little sort of bullet pointed list that Safe for Arizona has developed. We really want to see 2020 pass. There's a lot of good stuff in it. It's definitely better than 2020.
So this is going to be an amendment to the 2020. So you're planning on 2020 passing, and then you guys are going to come in there and fix it.
Yeah,
that's the idea.
I'm very much a proponent of 2020 passing.
Okay.
And I know there's objections to it. I know that people don't like the kind of the restricted market, the restricted number of licenses. That's obviously, people find that offensive. I get that, but this initiative is being paid for by the industry, and the consumers had their chance back in 2018 when Safer tried to get one on the ballot and get the signatures, because you need a lot of money to get an initiative on the ballot.
So that's who's controlling it, is the people with the money.
So either we get this passed now, or we'll be back here in 2024 again with another industry. So let's get past this point, and then let's fix some. For example, it legalizes 1 ounce. It allows for expungement of personal possession cases.
Is that people with 1 ounce or more or less?
1 ounce or less. Up between 1 ounce and 2.5 ounces is a petty offense.
So they still get released too?
Yeah. And both of those up to 2.5 ounces. If you have a conviction for possessing up to 2.5 ounces under the Smart and Safe initiative, you're eligible to have that expunged after. But I want to see much deeper reform. So I want to see any nonviolent marijuana crime needs to be at a minimum defelonized.
Right.
Eventually, and maybe at first, maybe a mid-tier of maybe the biggest cases, the cartel level cases. Maybe those can stay felonies. Whatever.
Yeah.
But we have to see sales and cultivation decriminalized or at least defelonized, as I call it.
So more like the moonshiners. You're seeing like what happened with alcohol. They used to be a lot more penalties for brewing your own. Now there's craft brews and all that stuff. So,
and so those are the kind of the fixes we want to see. We want to see a dramatic expansion in the number of licenses in 2024, and we want to see a lot of these other consumer-based reforms relating to what's criminal and what's felony, and really taking and shifting that whole framework down.
Yeah.
So we decriminalize a lot of it. At a minimum, we're defelonizing, so that people don't have to deal with like felony probation and felony going to jail and prison. I mean, there are 234 people in prison last year for just possession offenses. In Arizona prison, state prisons, and so and I think that people say, well, wait a minute, how if you tried to get an initiative on the ballot in 2018 and you're saying you couldn't, collected 75,000 signatures, but that was only half as many as you needed, say for Arizona, and the reason is because you didn't have any money. Well, why should we think that you'd be able to accomplish that in 2024?
Okay.
If the industry, if you need that industry money to get something passed, then how are you ever going to get? And my answer to that is because this is my theory, okay, and so I believe that when Arizona is a pretty good market, and I know people around the country in the industry look at Arizona as a good opportunity. But right now you can't end up buying a license out for less than, really $10 million.
Right.
And once it goes legalized, I mean, that's going to jump up to at least 20 million, if not more than that.
Yeah.
30 million just to buy a license. It's a lot of money, even for a wealthy investor. So I'm thinking, rather than someone coming in and dropping 30 million on a license in 2024, how about instead you just give us a couple 100,000, and we'll get this on the ballot, and we'll expand the number of licenses, and you can get one for an application fee at that point.
Yeah, which way it should be.
So, and I don't care if that money comes from in-state or out-of-state, because there's no residency restriction anyhow on who can have a license in Arizona. So I think once they see legalization pass in Arizona,
I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of Canadians that come in looking for cannabis that come to Arizona that can't get it right now.
Right.
And then they're going to be limited, like you say. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity from investors from Canada.
That's what I believe that, and I think that's why in 2024 I think we are going to be able to find investment into a 2024 initiative.
Yeah, I see that too, man. Definitely. Well, definitely best of luck for that, because like you said, vote this in, vote yes now, get it going, and then let's come in and make it right.
It's all about moving the ball down the field. I mean, you got to be in it for the long game. Football games, I like to use a metaphor. You don't win a football game by every play is a Hail Mary pass to the end zone.
You never played Mad with me, huh?
You gotta move the ball down the field. It's all about first downs.
Yeah.
Winning a football game is all about first downs. 2020 is a first down. 2024 is going to be another first down. Eventually, we're going to be in the striking zone for the end zone, at which point you must take it in. And that by end zone, I mean total legalization. Yeah. Total legalization where it's like as if you're selling, oranges, or as people like to say, tomatoes, which is not entirely unrestricted. There's still regulations that apply to growing and selling tomatoes, but until we get to that point, that's the end zone.
Right.
That's where we're heading for this. So, but before we're not going to get there. Like we have the Arizona Justice League. He's got an initiative. If I were king, I would say let's this one. I'll pick this one because it's the best in terms of, but it will never pass. It doesn't have a chance to even make it on the ballot. So it's just it's an exercise in futility, really,
right?
In many ways. So eventually we'll get there, but it was first downs, one first down at a time.
Wow, well, definitely. So keep that in mind, guys. It's not a win in the race. It's a progression of
slow and steady wins the race, man.
Yeah, making it happen. Well, cool, Tom. I appreciate you coming out today and talking with us, and
it's a
everybody
pleasure.
for tuning in and talking today. So Thank you, everybody. Do you have anything else to throw in there before I shut it down? Or
Just make sure you do. You vote in 2020, the initiative needs your support. Don't get hung up on the dispensary industry or anything like that. We'll fix that, as I said. So please, get the vote out. It's going to be close, and we want to make progress. We don't want to send anyone to prison anymore. Like I said, 234 people in there in prison for simple possession. That we can't allow that to continue.
Definitely. And follow Tom Dean, cannabis attorney, on Facebook,
and you can check out my website, Arizona Cannabis, attorneyforcannabis.com. Sorry, I have another website too, but the one you want to know is attorneyforcannabis.com.
Attorneyforcannabis.com. Not Arizona Attorney. Eternity.
Eternity.
That's funny.
Attorneyforcannabis.com.
There it is.
Yeah.
And that's Tom Dean, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Right,
Talking today. Shadow.